Hello, hello. Welcome to The Whole Elephant. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Eric McClanahan. If this is your first time joining us on the podcast, the name The Whole Elephant comes from the poem The Blind Man and the Elephant, where six blind men are asked to describe an elephant, and they all just describe it based on the first body part that they touch. And so this podcast is my attempt of seeing outside of my perspective, outside of what's right in front of me and what has been right in front of me my whole life, and see how other people are living, both in their careers and in their jobs and in their spiritual journeys. Today, my guest is Craig A. Meyer. I've known Craig for a long time, and I've known Craig as a crazy, talented individual. He grew up loving dance, being inspired by dance, and transitioned that into a career. Also being an amazing singer, transitioned that into a career. Broadway, national tours, lots of musicals, lots of TV, lots of film, until he found his real niche, which was he looks and sounds incredibly like Elton John. And for the last 15 years, Craig has been the number one Elton John tribute singer in the world. I mean, we're talking massive venues all over the world, bands, symphonies, orchestras, the whole deal. He's absolutely incredible. You should just go to YouTube real quick. Almost Elton John is the name of his experience that he puts on. Craig A. Meyer, Almost Elton John. Just throw it into YouTube and watch some clips. He's unbelievable. We had a chat about how do you become Elton John, and all the spiritual stuff that he's gone through and learned and has been part of his life. So sit back, relax, enjoy the chat. Craig, hey man.
Eric McClanahan, how are you, man?
We're doing it.
I love this. I mean, our history goes back 20 plus years.
I know.
How old are you now? Is that an okay question to ask?
It's fine. 41.
Dang, really?
Yeah.
You always seemed like a kid to me because I've known you since you were a kid. So I guess
Yeah, for sure.
you're 41?
41.
You're like a grown man and everything. I love that.
Wife, 10-year-old daughter, the whole thing, man. I grew up.
Dang. How's your sister?
Great. Yeah. My sister Kelly doing good. Yeah.
I adored her.
37. Yeah.
Just a sweet soul, just so present.
Yep. Still is.
And how are your parents? Sorry, I'm doing all the catch up in front of this.
No, it's all good. Everyone's doing good. Yeah.
That's
everyone's
great to
good.
hear.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Where are you right now? I know you've lived in LA. I'm sure you've lived in New York. Where is your home base now?
I have been in Atlanta since 2006.
Okay.
Left LA for Atlanta for a job as the artistic director at a brand new facility here in the Atlanta area. And those people turned out to be very unscrupulous. And I was fired after 2 days without cause.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. So my big move from LA to Atlanta fell apart quickly.
Yeah, but you stayed.
Yes, and the Lord has completely redeemed what was a horrible situation. I mean, it was bad. It was pretty dark after that happened, and me and God had some real serious sit down, face to face conversations. And 18 years later, I own my own business. I own a house. I have people that work for me and people that I work with. It's crazy how the Lord has just massively redeemed a horrible situation.
Awesome. I have so many Elton John questions, but I want to start back towards the beginning.
Okay.
When did singing, acting, when did this career, when did you feel inspired by it? Was it since you were a kid? When did it all start for you?
So music was always a part of our household. It was never not a part of our household. My parents met when my father, who was at seminary at Concordia College in St. Louis, as part of his work-study program, they had to be involved in the local churches. And he chose to sing in a choir in a local church that happened to be the church that my mother went to. And the story goes that the first day he walked in for choir rehearsal, my mother turned to the soprano section and said, That one's mine. And they were married 6 months later. And they were married for over 60 years until their passing. My mother passed in 20 and my father passed in 22.
Hmm. Wow, recent.
So yeah,
Sorry to hear that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's still a little tender. Still a
That's
little
a good
tender.
run though. That's a really good
It
run.
is. It is a good run. So, music was always part of the house. We always were singing and doing stuff. In the early 70s, we moved around quite a bit. My father loved to travel. And we were living up in Vancouver, Washington, where my dad was the associate pastor at a Lutheran church there. And I had a lot of energy. I probably, in those days, it was termed hyperactive. I think these days it's ADHD or some other acronym.
Sure.
And a new drug had just hit the market, this wonder drug called Ritalin. And they offered it to my mother, and my mother said, "No, that's not going to happen. I will find some place to put my child's energy." And so my sister, my middle sister, who's 18 months older than I, um, we got put into dance class because the organist at my father's church had a dance studio. And so we went and did an evaluation class to see what it would be like. And I was told that I could make sounds with my feet, and people would applaud me. And I was
Perfect.
like, sign me up. So that kind of got the ball rolling. And about a year later, we moved back to California. My dad took a calling at a church in Santa Ana. And Marlene Shell, who owned the studio, I still am connected to her and her family, pulled my mother aside and said, "Hey, keep the kids in dance for at least another year and then let them decide if they want to continue on or not." She goes, "I really feel like they've got talent and they just need to explore it a little bit more just to see where that would take them."
Yeah.
And I was sold. I loved it. I thought it was great. It was great fun. We ended up at a good dance school in Southern California, but with an amazing teacher who then left shortly after we got there to create his own studio, and we went with him. And Dan Collins, pretty much like when I perform on stage, that training is what I take out with me every time.
Oh, interesting.
He there was in at the studio. I was in a men's. It was called men's class. We were all under the age of 15. I was, I don't know, 10, something like that. And we learned how to walk. We learned how to dance as men. We learned how to carry ourselves. I was in a pre-professional group with girls, and we were all paired, and we were doing lifts and tricks and stuff that, at 10, I was lifting girls over my head. And so, it was it the school itself was very unusual in that Dan, who was a professional actor and dancer in LA and all over the place, was really giving us the tools to build a career. I don't know where any of those guys are now. I don't think any of them stayed in the industry. I'm probably one of the only few who have continued on in the industry. But I got my SAG card in 1978. So in 2 years, I'll have been in the union 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you
And
were you a 10-year-old? Were you a 10-year-old going, "Oh yeah, this is it. This is my lane. I want to do this
oh,
professionally."
I was totally sold.
So it wasn't
Completely
like a
sold on
hobby.
what.
You were in.
No, no. And much to my parents' chagrin, when I became more of an adult, they're like, "So when is this going to be done?" And I'm like, "Never." you know? Um, my mom, God bless her, back in the dark ages before there was cable, there were there was Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 11, Channel 13, and then the UHF roll the dial, try to find PBS channels.
Sure.
And Channel 5, Channel 11, Channel 13 on the weekends and at night would run old movies because there were no royalties due, they weren't covered by residuals, so they would just run old movies, and it was always the Saturday matinee and whatever. So we watched all those old movies. I grew up watching Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly,
Mm.
Ginger Rogers, Sid Charisse, all these great MGM movies and all that stuff. And I thought that I was going to be in movie musicals. And I was in a dance school where we were doing that kind of work. And they were still making some movie musicals, not a lot, but they were still sort of happening. I just had no idea.
Yeah.
I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I'd never seen a lot of legit or professional theater. I'd seen community theater, but I'd never seen like an actual equity theater show. I've been there used to be in Southern California a lot of dinner theaters, Showboat Dinner Theater, the Grand Dinner Theater, and I think that I saw a couple of shows in those dinner theaters, but that
Yeah.
wasn't like a professional theater where you're not getting, chicken and vegetables. You're sitting in the theater with a program in your hand and you're there to watch the show. So in 77, I think it was 77, 78, a chorus line, which had won the Tony the year prior in New York, was opening the new Schubert Theater in Century City. Unfortunately, that theater is gone now. But
Hmm.
they were the first show that went in there. I was aware of Broadway and theater. There were certain songs from the show that had made it onto the radio and in my realm because my dance teacher had introduced us to some of that music. And when it came there, I was like, I really want to see this. I knew nothing about the show. And if you've seen a chorus line, it deals with some really heavy topics.
Sure.
I mean, it it's heavy. And somehow I convinced my father to take our family to a Saturday matinee of a chorus line at the Schubert Theater. And I'm gonna get choked up. Sat there in that theater, and I looked on that stage, and I went, "That's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm called to do." And 10 years later, I made my debut in the National Tour of Cats at the Pantages. And a year after that, 2 years after that, I made my Broadway debut.
Yeah, I
And
mean I had a same moment. Mine was with Wicked because that's everyone's
mm,
entry point into theater. That's my age that didn't grow up on theater, but everyone went and saw Wicked.
yeah,
And I remember sitting in the Pantages going, I think there's been a part of my life missing. There's a part of my soul that's been missing until this moment. I had a very, very spiritual experience at
mhm,
the theater like that.
yeah.
Cats, how long did it take you to become a cat? Was there specific training to become a cat?
So, so, summer of, maybe it was 87, I think, 87, I think. Um, uh, I was in Florida visiting family and running around Disney World. And I had worked at Disney World in the early 80s, so I was seeing friends and hanging out. And my pager went off on my belt. Yes, we only had pagers back then. And it was my buddy calling me. So I called him and he said, "Hey, the National Tour of Cats is in LA or is going to be in LA and they're going to be doing auditions. And you really need to come home and audition for the show." He had done it at the Pantages. And I said, "I'm in Florida. I'm enjoying." He said, "Look, cut your trip short. Get home. If they need a Skimbleshanks, you're going to get a job." And I'm like, I said, "Fine." So I shortened my trip, flew home, and the audition was at the Methodist Church at Highland and Franklin, which
Hmm.
has been there for forever. It's still there.
Yeah.
And uh, I went to the audition. There were like thousands of people there, hundreds of people there. And I made it down to the very end. I got through the entire Jellicle Ball. I got through the ballet combination, sang whole 9 yards. And there were three of us at the very end of the day. And the dance director, Richard Stafford, uh, as we were finishing up, he said, "Hey, your ballet technique isn't as strong as it could be." I said, "You're right. Ballet was never my favorite class. It's never my thing." He said, "Well, if you get the show, it would be really beneficial for you if, that was a little bit short up." I'm like, "Sure." I think this was a Wednesday, and we danced for probably 6+ hours. So I went home and had a glass of wine and some food and went to bed. I was literally immobile Thursday. I could not move. I just laid in my apartment. It was just like, just don't make me move, please. Friday morning, I got up to go to turns class and ballet class. Got up, got showered, got my clothes on, had my leg warmers, had my dance bag, and as I'm walking out the door, my phone rings, and I paused at the door until I heard the beep, and I heard, "Hey Craig, this is John. This is Andy Lift from Johnson Lift Zerman. We want to offer you a position in the National Tour of Cats." I lunged for the phone, said, "I'm here. I'm here." And basically, they wanted me in San Francisco Wednesday of the next week to start rehearsals for the show. We did the deal. I dropped my dance bag and I never went back to dance class. And so I arrived in San Francisco the next week. And I think I was in rehearsals like 3 or 4 weeks to learn the show. It's
Yeah.
it's a 3 hour dance concert. It is
Yeah.
very intense. And so I would rehearse during the day and then watch the show at night. And then we finished up the San Francisco run. We came back down to LA. I had driven up and drove back to LA. And then I opened at the Pantages, I guess that first Tuesday. We played for 2 weeks there, and then we went to San Diego, then Orange County, and so we kind of played the Southern California area for a little bit, and it was
Yeah.
great because my family came. It was so great to like. It's like I'm in a freaking national tour. I,
Yeah.
you know, so I did that
That's
for 2 years.
awesome.
Got back to California, and then auditioned uh, somewhere in there, I guess. Oh, that's what it was. The summer that I auditioned for Cats, I also auditioned for Jerome Robbins' Broadway, which was a show that was headed to Broadway that year. Made it all the way to New York from LA and got to sing and dance for Jerome Robbins, but did not get the show. And then the casting director, Jay Binder, rest his soul, came back to LA when he was auditioning for another big show. And he called me in for that. And he called a lot of people that had been at the Jerome Robbins call for that. And I booked the show in LA and moved to New York to do Meet Me in St. Louis.
Yeah. Did you feel at this time, like, were you an actor who could sing and dance? Were you a dancer who can sing and act? Like, what was the thing that you kind of said, this is who I am, I'll figure out the rest? Or was it all encompassing at the same time?
I think I always considered myself a triple threat.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be that Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire person.
Yeah.
And when I moved back to LA in '85 from Florida, the the Civic Light Opera scene was very robust. And for, I don't know, 20 years or so, there was a group of us that were the gypsies of the Southern California area. We just went from show to show to show to show to show. It seemed like I always did the first show of the year up in Santa Barbara. So right after Christmas and New Year's, I'd go up to Santa Barbara for 3 months. And then
Mm-hmm.
so we would just travel around the Southern California area. But this was my MO. If it was a dance call, I would go in and be able to tap, pull a triple pirouette, kick behind my head and do the splits. And they'd like, please stay to sing. And they'd like pray that I could sing. And I'd go in and sing and hit my high C. And they'd be like, great, you got a job. If it was a singer's call, I'd go in and I'd sing and do my high C. And then they'd say, please stay to dance. And then I'd stay to dance and I would do my thing. And they'd be like, great, you have a job.
Yeah.
And after a while, you start working with the same producers and directors and choreographers. And you get that you're on that train.
Right. Right.
And whether it was for, and in between Civic Light Opera shows, I had worked for Disney in Florida, and then when I came back to LA, went to Tokyo Disneyland for like 8 months, 8 9 months, and then came back to LA. So whenever I wasn't on stage with a CLO or doing a TV thing or film thing, I was working at Disneyland on a regular basis. I
Yeah.
did main shows on the video stage. I did special events. If there was like a rope drop for the 35th anniversary, I was in that show. If it was,
Yeah.
you know I just was that utility person along with a group of us that we just that was how we made our money.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
You have a lot of TV and movie credits and Broadway show credits and stuff. Was there a path that you were looking for, or were you just taking the next right job? Were you hoping for anything specific?
in those days, I knew that I wanted to do Broadway. Because that's sort of like the pinnacle. That's the thing. If you're going to
Sure.
be on stage, that's it. Um, uh, I think that at some point I really, really would have loved to have had a leading role in a show on Broadway. That would have been fun.
Hmm.
Uh, when I went to New York to do the show, uh, New York was fun, but I knew I wasn't a New Yorker. I
Mm.
was like, if I'm gonna starve and like pound the pavement, I want to do that in LA where I have family and I can go to the beach and do whatever.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it in New York. Was that a great decision? Don't know, but it was a decision that I made.
Sure.
And had I, when Meet Me in St. Louis closed, had I stayed there and not gone back to LA and been in LA the following year, the spring of '91, I wouldn't have auditioned for the Barry Manilow tour that I went on. And had
Hmm.
I not done that Manilow tour, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. So it would
Yeah.
have been a completely different sliding door that I would have gone through, and it just would have been it would have been a different journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
I met Barry Manilow recently, actually. What a nice
oh,
guy.
really?
Yeah, genuinely a nice
Yeah,
guy. And
yeah.
still, I mean, we went to his show in Vegas. He's still rushing it. Like the show was fantastic, really good, so much
Yep.
fun.
When we took the show out in '91, he had done a he was done an interview with Rolling Stone magazine or something, but the quote from it was the showman of our generation, and
Mm,
that was like part of the ad. Rolling Stone says the showman of our generation, and he kind of is.
yeah, yeah, no, no doubt. Especially he had a whole section where he just went through all the jingles he's written. I mean,
Oh yes, the very special medley, the VSN.
yes, it's incredible. Um, you're I was looking on your Almost Elton website, and I mean you're booked. You're busy. Is this like the full-time thing, or is TV, film, Broadway? Are you still doing auditions? Are you like what is your life now in that realm?
I had to give up my TV and film agents years ago because I
Yeah.
just went home, and um, this gig uh, is is a good gig. I
Yeah.
do very well. God has been very good, and I am very blessed. And I would love to do a piece of theater, even locally, but I would need for someone to come to me and go, "Hey, in our 2025 season, we're thinking of doing X show, and we'd like for you to play this character."
Yeah.
And because I would have to put it on my calendar that far out, because
Right.
I have bookings through the end of 2025 right now.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's the calendar stays full. It goes in cycles. There will be an air pocket here or there, and I've learned to be like, well, God's gonna fill it up, and it does. It gets filled, and on I go.
Yeah.
I'm confident that the Lord has me in the palm of His hand, and if I'm supposed to be working, I'll be working, and I
Yeah.
trust that.
So, I mean, talk to me about the start of this gig. How does one even start to become Elton John? How does this? I could see, going, oh, I kind of look like him, and I'll play at parties and sing some songs for some folks, and they say I sound like him. But how does it turn into a job?
It was not your story is far more interesting than the real version because I mean there's a few similarities. Uh, I was so when I moved here to Atlanta and everything fell apart, I got back into survive mode and then thrive mode, and that meant opening up a vocal coaching studio and training on the fact that I was a Broadway performer with national credits,
Yeah.
and started coaching people and uh, uh, did a little bit of survivor work for a few months, and then by uh, July of that year, I moved here in February. Everything fell apart. July, early August, I had booked my first gig at the Alliance Theater here in Atlanta, which is the big Lort house like the Music Center is in LA.
Hmm.
And so started doing that. And while I was coaching, I had advertised in some local papers and things like that. And a woman came into my studio to work on her Dolly Parton act. Melody Knighton has been in the tribute industry now for, gosh, 30 plus years. She's originally from here, but she lived in LA. And if you remember the Billy Joel video, "We Didn't Start the Fire,"
Hmm.
she plays Lucille Ball in that video.
Mm.
It's uncanny how much she looks like Lucy. And she had sort of expanded and started doing Dolly Parton, but she was working on her voice and whatnot. So she came into the studio to work on that. And in our conversation, she was like, well, there's got to be somebody that you might be able to do in the tribute industry. And in my head, I'm thinking, I don't want to go to the elephant graveyard of entertainment to become a tribute artist. It's not, I'm a legit actor. I'm like a
Sure.
real actor. That's what I
Yeah.
do. So I said no for about 2 years. And then I'd been working with a local theater here in town doing equity work, and they did a special event, and I did a couple of songs at the piano, and a couple of them were Elton John tunes. I wasn't doing Elton, I wasn't trying to be Elton, I was just doing some Elton John songs that I knew. And after the show, I had a dozen people come up to me and go, there were moments where I heard it in your hands and in the playing, and a little bit in your voice,
Hmm.
and that's legit. I taught myself how to play the piano with the music of Elton John, Billy Joel,
Mm.
and Barry Manilow. So that was already part of my thing. And Elton John is a very gospel playing musician. And you know me, I've played in the church for a whole lot of years. So that was
Sure.
already in there. So I called up my now very good friend Melody, because we became very good friends, and said, okay, you've cracked this code. Will you help me figure this out? And we put together the looks. We worked on the makeup because she's also a makeup artist. We did a photo shoot. We shot a demo. We put together a website, and she sent out my information to her 20 years of people then in the industry and said, "You don't know this guy, but you will. He's the real deal." And that sort of got that started, and that was October of 2008. And I did my first gig as Almost Elton John on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2008 into 2009.
Wow.
And so 15 years ago, it all got started.
Yeah.
And within half, I was playing Las Vegas. And that same year, put my band together. And then a few years after that, did my first symphony show out in Palm Desert. And it's just been forward march from there. And it very quickly overtook all of my teaching and theater work here in town. And I just, when you have an 800-pound gorilla, you take care of the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Uh,
that's
I
what the show.
I, along with a lot of creatives, a lot of artists, struggle with imposter syndrome.
Oh,
Um,
I am
and
an imposter. It's all
you're
I am.
you're literally being an imposter of like literally like one of the top five showman artists ever. I mean,
Yeah.
how did you have the confidence, especially at the beginning, to go, I can do this?
Eric, I didn't know any better. Uh, I my my admonition to my students when I was coaching them was, you're going to go over the cliff one way or the other. If you run to the edge of the cliff and stop, you will bounce down the front of it and get very bruised and bloodied. If you run to the edge of the cliff and throw yourself off and expect to soar, there's a good chance you might do it.
Mm,
And I, my, there's several patterns in my life. One of them is that I will say yes to something that I know nothing about and then figure out how I have to do it.
yeah.
Did that when I wrote my first show. I mean, I just, I'm like, sure, I can do that. Why not? Okay, now I got to figure out how to do it.
Man, I need that.
Uh, yeah. I also, I know how to, uh, I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to find people that know more than me and be politely persistent until I get the information that I want and that I
Mm,
need. Um, uh, I also know that when I started this, that I had worked for decades with Disney and watched some of the greatest show directors ever put together these half hour, 45-minute entertainment pieces
yeah.
that really just packed a punch. I spent 2 years on the road watching Barry Manilow, and as Rolling Stone said, the greatest showman of our time, watched
Yeah.
him work his audiences. I watched how that show got put together. Um, I had all the tools in my hands to create something that would work for me.
Yeah.
And, I look back at my first sizzle reel and I cringe. It's really, but it got me work. It
Yeah.
got the ball rolling, and it allowed me to then do, the next video, because the first video was just me and playback and a piano, and then the
Yeah.
next one was me with a fake band, and then the next one was me with my real band on stage, and so it just snowballed and kept moving forward. And I always was trying to project the image, or my PR assets were for the jobs that I wanted. It was kind of like the people that work in an office: dress for the job you want, dress for success. If you want to be in the C-suite, you need to be wearing a suit and tie to work every day, or whatever that is. So I
Yeah.
wanted my promo materials to look like I had played large theaters on big stages with a
Sure.
lot of production value around me, even though that hadn't really happened yet. But it convinced the people with that to take me on because it looked like I had.
Right.
It,
Right.
it was
Right.
literally fake it till you make it.
Yeah, yeah. I just read an article this morning about comedians on TikTok are doing fake sets in front of green screens and then making it look like
Sure.
it's in a theater, and they put fake laugh tracks and just to make it look like they can do that if someone wants to book them for it. Smart
Yeah.
way to go. Fake it till you make it.
Yep.
Tell me about the show. You're not coming out and saying, "Hey, I'm Craig. For the next 2 hours, I'm going to be Elton. Wink, wink." You are coming out full blown. I am Elton John from the beginning, right?
The premise is that you are at an Elton John concert
Yeah,
and you are seeing almost Elton John, which
yeah,
is my character's moniker. Uh, and in the last year, I've kind of shifted how I even talk about what I do. I never like the term impersonator because that
mhm,
just, it's like it just rings of like, bad Elvis impersonations and things like that.
yeah,
Um, I used the word tribute artist for a lot of years because I liked it, just sounded a little bit more elevated. 2 years ago, we changed the name of the show from the Elton John Remember When Rock Was Young, the Elton John tribute, to Remember When Rock Was Young, the Elton John experience, because you're
mm,
going to experience an Elton John concert. And
yeah,
I started talking about my portrayal of Elton John, much like
right,
Taron Egerton did in Rocket Man. I am portraying Elton John in my shows, and
right,
that way, then it also releases me for it to be my portrayal of him. You know, are there other uh, Elton John acts that maybe sound more like Elton? Possibly. Are there some that maybe play more like him? Possibly. I don't know because I don't look at what other people are doing in the Elton realm. I don't
right.
care. I don't want what other people are doing. I've got my version of the show that I do with my set list and the dialogue and the jokes and everything that I've written and developed for my show, and that's what I do. I don't. I'm. This is how I approach it. I'm in my lane. I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to do that really, really well.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you've done theater and you've done concert. Does it feel more theater or does it feel more concert to you while you're up there?
so I created this as a piece of theater.
Hmm.
I built the set list and the dialogue as a piece of theater. People are like, so do you change the set list around? I'm like, well, it depends on the show that we're doing because like we're going to be up in at the San Mateo County Fair next Wednesday. We're doing a 90-minute straight through show. So that's one set list. And then 2 nights later, we're going to be in Arroyo Grande at the Clark Center. And that's going to be a 2-act show. So it's it's pretty much the same set list, but it's slightly different. And when I'm on the ships, I do two 45-minute shows. So it's kind of like the top part of the show and the last part of the show. But there's a certain cadence to the shows that I do.
Hmm.
Putting pressure on the audience, taking it off, the pressure off, so that I can elicit the kind of response that I want. Um, Certain songs are in certain places because they hit in a certain way. You wouldn't move "I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face" from the second act of My Fair Lady to the first act of My Fair Lady because it wouldn't make sense.
Mm.
You know, in my show, the last three songs in my show in any version that you see are your song "Crocodile Rock" and "Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting." And
Yeah.
if there's an encore, it's usually "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me." When my show opens, it's pretty much "The Bitch Is Back," "Philadelphia Freedom," "Goodbye Elbrook Road," "Benny and the Jets," because there's a rhythm to it that gets people engaged the way that I want to engage them.
Right. Right.
And it's, yes, it's a concert. Yes, every audience is different and they respond to songs differently. There are times when I'll get recognition applause when I start a song, and that's
Yeah,
always really
absolutely.
exciting for me. It's like they've bought the premise that I am him because they're
Right,
gonna
right.
they're gonna hear one of their favorite songs. Um, but there's a pattern to it, and there is um, a steadiness to it that allows me to then sit back and enjoy the audience and the moment because I'm not having to worry, wait, what did we change that song or what am I doing next? Or, you know,
Sure,
uh
sure.
yeah.
Do is it hard? Do people, because people aren't expecting you to be Elton John in his current state. People people want to hear Crocodile Rock in prime Elton John form. Is that true? I mean, are they
So
expecting 20-year-old Elton John giving full bore energy to these songs because that's the nostalgia that they remember?
so uh I call what I do glam Elton as opposed to contemporary Elton. Contemporary
Mm,
Elton is who we've got right now.
yeah,
The 70 that sort of, you know, past 50 version of who he is, you
yeah,
know, um, uh, and there's nothing wrong with that version of him. But from a stage production standpoint, you want the feathers and the beads and the platform
yes,
shoes and all
yes.
the production value and the glittery stuff that goes with that. I do not confine myself to only that era of music. I do everything up to current stuff. In our symphony show, uh, when I was still in the infancy of the show, I was dreaming of where it could go, and I was like, one day I would love to do a symphony version of the show. It would be so much fun, and I thought that would be like 10 years down the road. Well,
Yeah.
we did it in five, 4 or 5
Mm,
years, and I was already dreaming up how do I make this show special in addition to having the orchestra with us.
yeah.
So I started crafting in my head a Broadway suite because I figured, well, the people that are going to the symphony have probably been to the Broadway series at whatever theater we're in because usually in any town they share a lot of the same spaces. So I dreamt up this Broadway suite that starts with the call and response of Circle of Life from Lion King,
Mm.
goes into Written in the Stars from Aida, into Electricity from Billy Elliot, into Can You Feel the Love Tonight, and then finishes with the grand reprise of Circle of Life with the, till we find our place, and the
Yeah.
big at the end.
Yeah.
And it's it's magical for me. We did those first shows in, I can't remember what year it was, 13 maybe, in Palm Desert, and we just most recently did it. We had 3 shows in 2 days up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. We had a 3 p.m., a 7 p.m., and a 3 p.m. on a Saturday and a Sunday. I've never sung 6 hours of music in 2 days. Don't know if I could ever do it again, but it was sure fun. And having a 50-piece orchestra playing this music from The Lion King, and we open the second act with "Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding," which is the first cut on the of the second side of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album, and to hear these strings and these horns come in just like makes the tiny hairs on your body stand up.
Yeah.
And when I think that I'm like I'm the dude, I'm the dude that they're doing this for,
Yeah.
and 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 I would love to step onto a Broadway stage and have an orchestra pit playing for me, but 5 to 6 times a year or more, I get to step out on a stage and I have a 50-piece orchestra that's playing just for me and
Okay.
my band.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not up for Tony Award, but I'll tell you, I sure feel like I'm a winner when I'm
Yeah.
doing that.
Absolutely.
And it's so exciting. So the elements of theater and concert and stand up and improv, because things happen and people yell things out and people will, the things that can happen during a show. I've had it all happen. I've had
Yeah.
people come up on stage. I've been heckled. I've had I've had wardrobe mishaps. I've had music go sideways with a band or an orchestra. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that can possibly happen. I was doing a showcase one time in New York and finished I'm Still Standing with, I finished it with one foot on the piano bench and one foot on the piano. and I was dismounting and I had on a long coat and my foot got caught and I ended up on my back in front of an entire room of buyers, you know? But
Yeah.
I got up and I laughed it off and made a joke. And we had 3 bookings that year from people that said, look, we liked your show, but when you handled that the way that you did, you were like, we have to have him. If he
Yeah.
can handle that, the show's going to be great. So it's there's I, it would be accurate to say that all of my training, all of the shows that I've worked on as a performer or as a creative or director, choreographer, or whatever, led me to creating this show.
Yeah.
And it literally, and then on the other side of it, I spent 20 years as a counselor at Actors Equity Association, and that was my MBA in entertainment business.
Mm.
And all of that training has come into play to make me the businessman and the negotiator that I am. I know how
Yeah.
to read a contract. I know how to write a contract. I know how to politely hold people to their word in a contract when they are trying to say, well, I know we kind of said that we were gonna, but we can't. And I was like, I appreciate that, but there's going to be a penalty for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it cannot be, you get to choose the penalty, but you've got, we made an agreement. This is what the
Sure.
agreement is for.
Sure.
And I'm not some kid who's just glad to be able to perform. And, ooh, thank you so much. It's like, no, this pays my mortgage and my health care and puts food on the
Yeah.
table and pays my employees. And, you know, this is my business. It's not called show fun. It's called show business.
Yeah.
And I believe that.
Yeah. It seems like you would have to keep yourself in pretty good physical conditioning because it seems like a very physical show. You're in you're yes. You're
Come, Joe.
you're in platforms or high heels, you're dancing around, you got to squeeze into some tight costumes. I would imagine some of them get heavy. What is the physicality of the show and how do you keep yourself in shape to pull that off?
So you know that meme, tell me what you do without telling me what you do?
Yeah.
My answer is I wear spandex for a living. Um, and because I wear spandex for a living, um, I have an amazing trainer that I've worked with for 3 years. I did a lot of body weight training for quite a while and then realized that I needed to up my game. And coming out of the pause, I was like, okay, now's the time to do it. And I've got a neuromuscular therapist that I work with twice a month who keeps all the joints and things working. I've got a chiropractor that I see once a week. I have a really great therapist. I've got all those components on my team
Hmm.
to help me do what I do.
Yeah.
Uh, I was so top of April, Thursday morning, I was working with my trainer and we were talking about schedule and running and just how everything works. And I'm just busy. I'd just gotten off of something and was headed off to something else that weekend. And I said, you know, even if I got hit by a car tomorrow, because I am as healthy and in the shape that I am in, my recovery is going to be that much faster because I'm
Yeah.
already, and I'm no spring chicken. I'm 60 years old. I'm proud of my age. I'm not afraid of that at all. And
Yeah.
so we finished our training. We flew out Friday for Arkansas. I came back Sunday, got home at noon, went to a Braves game at 1:30 with my sister, had sushi that night, went to bed a little bit early because I wasn't feeling great, and woke up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and went, something's not right. This doesn't feel right. I've either got something obstructed in my colon and bowel system. It might be appendicitis, but it feels a little high for that, or I've got a tumor. Something's not right.
Hmm.
So I decided going to the ER at 2 a.m. was not a great idea because I would have sat there until the early hours anyway, because I
Yeah.
was not a DSW or anything. So got up a little bit before 7, got to urgent care at 7 a.m. By 10:30, I was diagnosed with appendicitis, arrived at the hospital at 11, went went into all that stuff and was in pre-op by 2:30, rolled into the operating room at 4 and was home in my own bed by 7 p.m. And I was supposed to leave Wednesday for an Atlantic crossing. And had this happened 2 days later, I wouldn't have been on a boat in the middle of the
Yeah.
Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I was back in the office the next day. I did have to sit myself down and go, hey, it's great that you feel really good. but you did just have surgery. They did cut you open. So you need to sit down for the time. So I had like 11 days off the road, and I took that time. My next gig was up in Vancouver doing 2 weeks on a ship in Canada and Alaska, and the ship broke. So the first week got canceled. So I had an extra week of recovery, which was great.
Nice. Yeah.
And then that following week did the first two shows after the appendicitis and the appendectomy. And I'll tell you, I knew I was okay and I was healing, but I was not healed. I got to the end of that first show and I was like, okay, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be right now. I'm feeling a lot better. And I'm working with a guy up at a sports clinic here. I just saw him yesterday, where we're working on getting my abdominal wall to re-engage and the fascia to reattach, because they, basically I had a tiny C-section, because they went in and opened up my abdominal wall in 3 places to poke and then pull it out. Yeah. And I have a lot more respect for women who have had a full C-section.
Sure, yeah.
That is like, that's some crazy stuff. That is some, and mine is like on a scale of like 1 to 10, mine is like maybe 0.01.
Right, right.
It's like,
right.
It doesn't even really register, but the concept I get really well now.
Yeah, sure.
So,
you mentioned your age.
Yes.
Oh yeah, keep going.
No, just saying, bouncing back from that, it was a great indicator that what I'm doing seems to be working,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not a great way to find it out, but if you got to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your age. Have you thought about how long you can do this? How long you can keep this up?
So I don't plan to ever retire.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll be performing as Elton for a lot of years. I have several other things that I'm doing. I've actually got, for any indie artists that are watching or people that perform, askmoe.app, ASKMOE.app is a brand new app that I've developed with my business partner Gary Arbuthnot to help musicians and performers find out if they're going to make money on a job or not. It's a offer evaluator.
Yeah.
To help musicians and performers build wealth by first figuring out how much they're worth. Yeah. And so that just launched. I've got high hopes for it. I think that there's a need for it in the industry. There are other apps on the market that kind of do this, but none of them look at the financial aspect to help build wealth. They mostly are logistics. Ooh, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. They mostly do logistics and are either very high end for people that have management teams and record labels, or are a little too provincial and don't really cover travel and other aspects that we think that we've got covered. But more importantly, this finance aspect is really, to us, the key, and the rest of the financial suite will probably be built out before the end of the year, which then includes an escrow calculator and an escrow ledger to help you start looking at your finances and not going, hey, I got $500, but but there are other places that have to go. And if you have to pay people and keep maintenance on stuff and pull out money for taxes, in our FAQ, it's like, why is there a tax line? Well, just ask Willie Nelson and Wesley Snipes why you need to put aside taxes. Yeah. Because if you're getting paid $10.99, they will come for it. They will find you. And it's only right. So in all of the conservatory programs, university programs that are churning out actors and musicians, even like, Berklee School of Music or whatever, none of them talk about the business side of the industry.
Yeah.
They don't know how to write a resume. They don't know how to negotiate a contract. They don't know how to read a contract. And when AskMo is fully built out, it's going to put those tools in people's hands so they can be a better business person.
So it's not an app that just goes, can I make money on this gig? Probably not. The app just says probably not, because the industry is crazy right now.
literally, what you do in the app is you drop in your configuration that AskMo is remembered. You drop in your top line number. You drop in whatever people you've got on that show, any travel expenses, any other expenses, any booking fees like agents or whatever, and then a tax number, how much percentage of tax you want to hold back. And then we posit that you should be taking home 35% or more of your top line fee.
Hmm.
Um, Below 25% is not good. And somewhere in between, you need to either ask for more money or take some other things off the table so that you get to that 35%. And when you're working with the app, on the right hand side of the screen is Mo, our avatar. And Mo is either smiling or he's not smiling. He's literally
Yeah.
telling you whether you should take this job or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that doesn't matter if you're getting $500 for a gig or 50,000 for a gig.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
literally is going to look at those numbers, and hopefully, our hope is that if we can get lots of people using this, local musicians that are building their reputation around town, if they were playing at the local restaurant for 250, but realized that it really needed to be 300 or 350 for them to actually make money and not pay for the privilege of performing,
No,
you know,
totally.
instead
Yeah.
of the owner saying, "Well, I'll just go get someone else." Well, if everybody else is using it, and they're like, "No, that's actually a 350 gig."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now all boats are rising, and now you're empowering people to know what their worth is
Right.
and look at themselves and go, "I'm a business,
Yeah.
and I need to be able to pay my rent or my mortgage and drive a car that works. And if I have a family, be able to put food on the table and diapers and whatever else that is." But again, no one ever talks to artists about the realities of the business.
Yeah.
They
No, I
they
mean,
get excited and they go for it. So that's like my next and is what I'm working
yeah.
on.
No, it's interesting being in LA because you could get a lead role in a musical, but it's in Long Beach or Orange County, and at the end of the run, you're like, I think I paid half of my profits in gas. Like,
Yeah.
but it's the lead role and you wanted to take it, so it's basically a pay for play system because you're
Yes.
spend and then sometimes you want to get a hotel because you don't want to make the drive after the show and you have a matinee the next day and all those things. That'll be really helpful for people. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We got to pivot to God because part of this
Please.
podcast is always about God. God, no God, spirituality. What does your journey look like over the years with all that?
I am the son of a Lutheran minister. I
Yeah.
was born on Saturday and church on Sunday, and I was never late. Um, I had my rebellion years in high school and early college, where I was like, "Well, this is my parents' faith, but what's my faith?"
Sure.
And read the books of the day that were out there that were positing other pathways and whatnot, and they all came up lacking for me, and I found myself back at my faith at the base of the cross,
Yeah.
and I am grateful every day that I serve a loving and merciful God whose mercies are new every morning, and my sin is as far from the east as from the west, and He loves me through my stupidities and chastises me and disciplines me when I need it, and lets me know that he's never gone. He's always there.
Yeah.
And I have a great faith community here at Redeemer Presbyterian here in Atlanta, Church of the Redeemer. I've been there 15, 16 years. Um, and it's an amazing community of believers who are invested in being challenged in their faith and looking outward to the community and the people around us.
Hmm.
Um, we have walked through some hard things as a community of faith, and come out on the other side. And I see God working every day in my life and the people around me. And I'm
Yeah.
grateful for the opportunity to speak into the lives of the people around me. As a man of faith, I don't run around pushing my faith in other people's faces, because that's not the world we live in right now. I firmly believe that the best way to talk about God and introduce God into a conversation is being in a relationship with someone.
Mm.
I had someone this past week who found out on Tuesday that their best friend had just dropped dead,
Yeah.
and I called them to see how they were, and they're a relatively new friend, so I really don't know what their faith status is. But before we got off the phone, I said, "Hey, can I pray with you?" And it was just a natural thing to do for
Yeah.
me. And they texted later. They were like, "I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for that."
Yeah.
And I've got another good friend who just had back surgery this past week, and I'm the lead of a text chain of a bunch of us who've all known each other for like 40 years, and I'm the one who's saying, "Okay, prayer warriors, today's the day." Blah blah.
Yeah.
It and like I said before, uh, God has so graciously superintended every part of my life, and uh, if I'm supposed to be working, I'm working. If I'm supposed to have appendicitis, I'm going to have appendicitis. It's yes, sin and death are in the world, and people make bad decisions. And when I moved here, and the people who made bad decisions and fired me after 2 days, you know, everybody has free will, and sometimes,
Yeah.
we unfortunately, bear the brunt of other people's bad choices. That's a true fact. But in all of that, I'm still confident that God is superintending my life as I submit that to Him.
Yeah.
And um, having people like Daryl Johnson and Dave Roberts and Ewan Kenny and these men who I've sat under as the heads of the churches that I've gone to, you
Yeah.
know, that has shaped my journey.
Mm.
And I, you know, the world is a the world has always been a very wild place, but it's gotten crazier in the last few years.
Yeah.
2020 proved that the world can like spin off his axis in really short order.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people make it through without faith.
Yeah.
Um, I talked about this earlier. In 2020, the world shut down on Friday, March 13th. I had to come home from Boston. A gig was canceled, and that was sort of the beginning of the shutdown worldwide. And my mother passed away on March 19th of 2020.
Mm.
Thankfully, we were still able to be there to sing her into heaven, because if they had tried to keep me out, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be in a jail cell somewhere, because that was not going to happen. 2 years later, my father passed away in May of 22. And during that time, my brother-in-law was diagnosed in 2020 with a glioblastoma. That got taken care of. He had another bout of different cancer, and then the glioblastoma came back. And he passed away on September 30th of last year. And my
Wow.
sister, who lives here in the Atlanta area with me, was boots on the ground for all three of those people.
Yeah.
So in the last 5 years, she lost the three most important people in her world, other than her children and grandchildren.
Right.
And the only thing that got her through was her faith. And I
Mm.
watched her every day get up and live out her faith.
Yeah.
And is sane, and not on drugs and not on antidepressants, and sure, there are days that are harder than others, but you know when you see people in your sphere whom I've known my entire life walk this out, it strengthened my faith to be able to look at that and go, yeah, I mean, it was tough losing my parents, but I can't imagine losing my spouse,
Yeah.
because I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, and literally watching her walk out her faith and being caught in some horrible situations, because when people die, people get weird, and like,
Yeah.
people did weird things around us, and people very close to her, and she still is loving on them, and
Mm.
that is her faith in action.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely.
So, my personal faith, I it, it's the only thing that keeps me together. It's that glue. It says that the spirit holds all things together. Well, without that spiritual glue, I'd be in a million tiny pieces.
Mm. You said that in kind of high school and college, you went through a little rebellious phase or whatever that looked like for you. When that was done, when that wasn't satisfying, was the thought like, "Oh, my parents were right," or was the thought like, "I need to go back, but I kind of need to redefine this for myself"?
Oh, it was definitely a redefinition of what my faith was.
Mm.
Much to the chagrin of my father, the theologian and clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
Uh,
What did that look like?
well, My father was really good in didactic relationships, or relationships where he was the uh, where he wasn't subordinate. My dad
Mm-hmm.
liked to be in charge.
Sure.
My dad, on some levels, was a narcissist, and I learned that from him and had to unlearn it, which was hard. But my father also didn't like conflict. He came from a
Mm.
family of origin where they would have like knockdown, drag out, screaming, throwing things matches. So my
Sure.
father did not do conflict. If you raised your voice, he'd be like, "Don't yell at me." And it's like, "I'm not. I'm excited." You
Yeah.
know, just that was not what he did. And if it got tense, he would just evaporate emotionally or physically. He would just leave the room, and you're like, "Wait, you can't walk out on this argument. You that's not fair." But that's how he helped. That's how he dealt with it. So there were times where we would get into a theological discussion and we wouldn't agree,
Hmm.
and it would drive him up a wall.
Yeah.
My dad held his beliefs very strongly, which I appreciate, but there were several times where we would get to a point and I would say, "Dad, are you questioning my salvation?" "No, son." But I said, "Dad, are you questioning my salvation?" "No, son." I said, "Are you questioning my?" "No." I said, "Then we're done."
Yeah.
Because greater minds than us have squabbled over these theological points.
Yeah.
And we're not going to solve it here. And you're not going to change my mind. And I'm certainly not going to change yours.
Yeah.
So let's agree to disagree. And I love you, but I do not see your point of view on this. And
Right.
I disagree. And that for me was was the best part of my own faith, because I wasn't just being spoon fed what he thought or what I experienced him saying every Sunday from the pulpit. I mean, everybody's vision of God is very much dictated by their relationship with their
By
own
their dad. Yeah, for
father.
sure. Yeah.
Well, mine not only was the voice of God, he was the physical embodiment of it. It was
Yeah.
lots of couch time all that. But all that to say, um, my faith is what keeps me centered. You
Yeah.
know, I have prayed Psalm 112. I think it's 112. I've forgotten. Every day for over 30 years. You
Mm.
know, um, every day and every night. That's and there's just it's just a part of my faith. It's what I do. It's how I move and function in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I think the thing I realized is the only thing I really want to hold tight on in my beliefs is that I need to hold all my beliefs loosely. That's that's the only thing I really hold
Sure.
on tight to, is that all of them are held loosely, and people that hold on tight and want to argue make me very uncomfortable, because why would I think that in right now I've learned it all and I get it all? That's not a good place to be, I don't think.
I have a friend. We were at a baseball game this week, and he's got an 11-year-old son who is frighteningly brilliant, like
Mm.
scary brilliant, and on the spectrum. And he thinks big, big thoughts, like big thoughts that even
Yeah.
people in the 50s kind of go, "I don't know if I would have gone there, but okay."
Yeah.
And 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 I talk with friends who say, why is this happening, or why did this happen to my friend, or you know, the big questions that we go to God for, to say, well, you're supposed to be the supreme being who built the world and created the world, so you know everything. So tell me what you know, so that I can feel like I'm in on the secret, because
Yeah.
I don't get this right now. And when we were in high school, we sang. There was a piece of music that we sang called "As the Rain," and it was based on Isaiah 55. And primarily, for me, the crux was Isaiah 55, 18 and 19. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. So as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." And when I find myself in the place of what,
Yeah.
why, how, I go there because it's God's way of saying, in the most loving way, in the most loving, you can't know my mind.
Yeah.
You will never understand a lot of this until you're on the other side of heaven with me. And that's okay, because that's where faith meets the road.
Yeah.
And that's why when I was talking with my dad and saying, look, are you questioning my salvation? Because for me, that's the only thing that I'm holding tight to. If there's anything that I'm holding on to, it's that self, it's knowing that the cross and the shed blood of Jesus is what has saved my soul.
Right.
Everything else is up for is you can squabble about, because again, people have squabbled for millennia about these things.
Right.
But I know that Jesus died for my sins, and because of that, I have entrance to the Father.
Right.
Period.
Right.
And after that, the rest of it is just it's parsley on the plate. If you
Yeah.
miss the main thing, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, I read a theologian years ago say, you know what the three hardest words in the Bible are for people to believe?
Hmm.
In the beginning.
Mm.
If you can get past those three words, the rest of it is easy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you've got to be willing to start there and start on that journey, because that's where it starts. If
Right.
you don't think that the scripture is divinely inspired, then you're not going to be able to get through the rest of the book.
Right.
You're and you're going to miss the best part of the book,
Yeah.
which includes salvation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
No, I mean, I love this. I love the idea of let's make sure we're sticking to the main things. Let's keep the main thing.
hmm?
And let's talk about it with people through genuine, authentic relationships. Let's not preach on TikTok posts, or let's not try to preach through political means, and let's not try to force things down people's throats. Let's literally go back to having relationships and authentic conversations, and share what we believe and hear what people believe. And that's what this podcast is all about, and I love that that's what you're about too.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks.
dude, I
Yeah,
thank you
I
so much for doing this podcast, man. I was so thrilled when you said
thank you
yes.
for inviting me.
I've
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Great.
I gotta look at the schedule. I gotta come see you perform. I have to. It sounds like a
Okay.
bucket of fun.
We've got, well, if you want to get crazy and come up to Central California next week, you can. I'll make that happen. If not, um, we're working on some Southern California things. If yeah, so we'll make it happen.
Awesome, awesome. Tell people where they can follow you, where they can keep up with what you're doing.
www.almosteltonjohn.com. On Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It is also at Almost Elton John. And the web app is AskMoe, AskMoe .app, APP. And I'm out here in the universe.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Craig.
Thank you, Eric.